right. Good evening, everybody, on this snowy Tuesday. We're still missing a few. Hopefully, they will catch up with us in a little bit. I don't know, maybe with having a snow day yesterday, everybody thought today was Monday instead of Tuesday. Not sure. But here we are. Um, First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody for their um, flexibility last week. It was a crazy week for me, which is no excuse, but it's just what happened. Our production, our school musical was last week, and I'm not directly involved in terms of directing or conducting, but I managed the auditorium, and they had lost some rehearsals, and their rehearsal schedule got behind, and I really ended up needing to be up there that Tuesday. So thank you for being patient with me last week. I had left a few things online, including an article that we're going to start off this evening discussing, and some other things. So hopefully I'm all straightened out with that. And weather-wise, it looks like things are starting to clear up a little bit too over the next few weeks. So maybe we're through the worst of that. Although I know the minute I say that, we'll get 5 feet of snow or something along those lines. Anyways, first things first, just to do a little follow-up and catch up. Hopefully everybody saw that over the course of this past week, I tried to get around to all of the Moodles. I had asked you to add a dialogue activity to your Moodle to give me a place that I can have a conversation with you and leave notes for you, and you can respond back to me in terms of feedback on your Moodles. A lot of what I'm seeing at this point is very good. There's a lot of great topics that are out there being developed. The segmentation bit of it, I can see there's been a lot of thought given to how to break up a topic into a way that can be presented online effectively. So I saw a lot of good work there. Many of you are well into starting to get the content filled in on your Moodles. I'm not going to specifically take a look at specific pieces of content unless there is something that you want me to take a look at. So with that dialogue set up, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do it through that. Anytime you would post a message to that dialogue, it'll actually kick an email my way saying that you've replied to our dialogue. Or you can use any of the normal means through Remind or through an email. But generally speaking, I'm going to be sort of looking at the larger structural issues and technical issues. Obviously, you guys are going to be far more versed in the content that you're teaching than I most likely will be. So, but if you want me to take a look at something and get feedback, just let me know. My plan going forward is that I will do another round of feedback in a couple of weeks, basically before we meet again, because next week is the central spring break, so we won't have a class meeting next week. So I'll try to do another round of feedback before our next class in 2 weeks, and then I'll try to do one more round 2 weeks after that, which will be the week leading up to when we meet on campus to take a look at these things and kind of beta test them. But if along the way, like I said, there's anything you want me to look at, then please let me know. Yeah, Erica, go ahead.
Should one section be about the equivalent of like one I don't know, like a one course, one day of a course of information?
Um,
I'm just having trouble deciding how much should go into a section.
yeah, I don't know. That may be a bit much. I mean, it's going to depend on the content. But it's if you're trying to put a full 50 minutes or hours worth of stuff per section, that's really, I mean, at that point you're really starting to develop a whole class.
Right. Okay.
So that, if it's content that sort of structures itself really well and you don't have to develop a lot of materials, then that might be okay. But I have a feeling that for most people, going with something a little bit more focused than
A
that.
shortened version is okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
no problem. Um, Yeah. So in any case, so in terms of the feedback on the Moodles, um, just know that if you need to get in touch with me or want to respond to the feedback that I gave, that is now a dialogue. So it will go back and forth between the two of us if you've got anything that you want to share. I noticed a couple of you looks like you've been joining other people's Moodles, and I don't know if that's for the purposes of giving feedback or things like that. But that was great to see. I absolutely encourage that. In a lot of my classes, it's I call it passing the headphones, where students are working on projects, and I encourage them to get fresh pairs of ears and so on. So that dialogue isn't locked to just you and me. So if you've got somebody that you're sharing your Moodle with to get some feedback, you can also use the dialogue tool for that as well, and it'll just start up sort of a second strand of dialogue between you and whoever else. So in any case, that just wanted to sort of follow up with that and let you know that I have been looking over the Moodles, and generally speaking, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing there. And we still do have the better part of a month before these things are due. So taking a look at where everyone is, it looks like people are in pretty good shape. A lot of the work, obviously, between now and then is going to be just about getting the content designed and put in. We will be spending the week or so after the spring break talking about assessment. That's sort of the one big piece of the puzzle that we've set aside for now, because we will be wanting to incorporate some sort of assessment into the Moodles, and that'll be sort of the last design piece there. Um, all right, so Moodles or anything else that anybody has any questions or concerns about at this point? Follow-ups from last week or from 2 weeks ago, since I didn't really get a chance to. Sandy, how do we get others Moodles? What you can do is you can join another student's Moodle. If you go to the same area where your Moodle is found and click on somebody else's Moodle, it would be the same as joining this class. It'll ask you to be logged in, and once you do that, then essentially you would be a student in that person's Moodle. So you won't see it from an administrative end, but you would be able to look at the Moodle as a student would, and sort of see what's going on that way. So that's an option. You don't have to do that, but if you want to go back and forth with another student, that would be the way to do it. All right. Other questions, comments, concerns, criticisms? Anything else at this point? Feel like I should have a recording of the Jeopardy theme or something to play during the wait times. All right, so let's turn our attention to this evening. The main topic this evening is audio, and also Web 2.0. I'm kind of combining last week's topic and this week's topic into one class, but we're going to focus mainly on audio. Web 2.0 actually isn't going to take a whole lot of our time tonight. So we've so far done visual media through graphics and graphic design. We've done moving visual media through movies. So now we're going to be taking a look at audio as another tool for instruction. And so tonight we're going to start by just doing a little follow-up to discuss the takeaways from the article that I had posted last week. Just to get us kind of into the mindset of using audio from an instructional standpoint and its strengths and weaknesses. And then we are going to be working in Audacity this evening. I had asked that everyone make sure that they have access to Audacity If you've got a CCSU computer, it's already on there. If not, it is a free app that works on any type of platform, Mac, PC, um, Linux, if you happen to have Linux. Hopefully you have that, because we are going to actually do a little practical exploration of it tonight. Not entirely, or again, focus completely on becoming masters of Audacity. There's a lot going on in that program and in audio production in general. But what I'd like to do tonight is to introduce you to a couple of concepts or tools that, regardless of what platform you're using to record on, can give you some things to think about or some strategies to use to produce the best quality audio that you can. So we're going to be walking through a little activity that will have you doing a couple of recordings and then making some alterations to those recordings. I didn't put it on the objectives. I realized I should have. To complete that activity, we're going to be using yet another Moodle activity, one of the ones we have not looked at yet, and that is the Moodle lesson. So you'll have a chance to see how a Moodle lesson works. We've taken a look at the majority of the other activities in Moodle. Lessons are a little bit more involved and complex, but they are another tool that you might want to consider using in your Moodles if you wish. So we're going to be using the lesson activity as a way to explore Audacity and to complete our project there. So we'll be doing that. I've got a couple of websites to point out that are, again, online, generally free resources for creating audio and for doing recording. And then we're going to finish up talking a little bit about Web 2.0 and Zoom, and what's going to be coming down the pike in terms of your presentations that you're going to be doing at the very end of the course, and what all is going to be involved with that, and Web 2.0 and so on. So that's kind of the scope of our evening tonight. So why don't we start just by doing a little recap of the article from last week. I reposted it under week 7. And this was the article just about, it was a little research-based recap of some of the strengths and weaknesses of using audio as instruction. And just thought I would start off by, if I can find, here we go. Start off by just seeing what people had in terms of takeaways from that article, strengths of audio, weaknesses of audio, things to be careful of, your impressions, if you've been exposed to using audio instructionally, what sort of things did you find out about it? So I've got a little page set up here for us to maybe list out some of the strengths or weaknesses or other comments. So who would like to start us off with some of what you took away from the article on audio?
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Well, I actually really appreciated the article because I kind of consider myself an auditory learner. So when students think about how they learn best, whether they're visual or auditory, or they like to read, that kind of a thing, I definitely like to not only hear information, but I also like to be able to speak information. You would never think it, huh? So I definitely connected with that in terms of using audio as for learners who do have that preference.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, auditory learning is one of the established intelligences, as it were, in terms of modes of instruction and the way that people process. So being able to present material from an auditory standpoint is definitely a tool that we want to have in our toolbox. And it's one of the things that is one of the first things that goes when you move into an online environment, especially when it's an asynchronous online environment. Obviously, in the classroom itself, a lot of it is auditory because you're speaking with your students are speaking with you, and there's a lot of that going on. What tends to happen if people aren't careful when they move into an online environment like a Moodle is that it becomes very text-based and very visually oriented, and you want to make sure that you're addressing the needs of your auditory learners as well. So yeah, definitely good for auditory learners. Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
You also said something about how when the instructor is speaking, you can use a more, I don't even want to say informal language, but you can talk the way you speak rather than having to be so formal, all typed out. And I think in certain contexts, students can connect with that a lot better and be able to just understand it better.
Yeah, that was the use of conversational language, which had come up in video as well. I mean, obviously, video has an auditory component to it, so there's a lot of crossover there. But that idea of, rather than using a formal language, which is oftentimes what happens in written, where it's very, cut and dried and not very expressive, that one of the advantages of using audio is that you do get that, you can use that conversational language. The article pointed out that one of the benefits of audio is that connection to the students, that students like to hear their teachers. They like to make that connection. Even if they can't see their teacher, even just being able to hear a voice and hear the expression and the inflection in the voice can make students feel a lot closer to the material than if they're just reading something on a page. All right. Yeah, good. What else? What else can we add here? Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
I remember it said something about it being easily combined with like other media, like text.
Yeah, it becomes a really good mode for pairing with other modes of instruction. And it is true, and I think they pointed out a couple of times in the article that research has generally found that, not that audio can't function well on its own, but that audio really becomes more powerful when it is paired with text or when it is paired with visuals. And that's sort of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. So, it's real easy if you've got something that's just visual to add a voiceover of that text, which it may sound silly because you're going, well, my students know how to read, but a lot of times having the visual and the auditory at the same time can be really helpful. Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Right, and on top of that, just to kind of add to that, is that when I found it, I didn't even think about it, but people with hearing disabilities, having, this is one of the weaknesses.
Yep.
It kind of adds to what we were just saying. They need that text on top of it.
Yeah. Hearing impaired. I was trying to come up with the word impaired. Yeah, and that's of course a general comment across any mode of instruction, is that you have to be aware if you're relying too much on a single mode, that there will be students who, for one reason or another, can't access that mode as well as others. So the idea of pairing audio with something else is always a good way to kind of cover the bases. So, if you've got a set of instructions, you maybe don't want to just give the instructions as audio, but also provide a text version too, or things like that. All right. What else can we add here? Strengths, weaknesses. There were a couple of other things that it did talk about in terms of weaknesses or things to be aware of, maybe. Who was that? Oh, Brian, go ahead.
Just, from a weakness, just the fact that it will add additional work for the instructor to record that audio.
Sure. Yeah, and as probably, and as I understand, several of you are discovering, and this goes back to something that we had come up with earlier on in the course, but the idea that doing material online multiplies the amount of time it takes to prepare the instruction. And certainly audio, as with any of these production technologies, requires a certain amount of background, a certain amount of technical proficiency, and you have to find the time to sit down and actually do the production for the audio. So that is, yeah, that was definitely something that they pointed out in terms of that. Another thing I wanted to make sure to point out under strengths, because we are dealing in an online environment, is that especially audio versus video, is that audio files are much, much smaller in terms of the size of the files. So if you're asking people to stream things and you don't know that they're going to have solid internet connections or high-speed internet, that rather than maybe giving them a video, which is going to use up a lot of bandwidth and have a fairly large file size, you might be able to replace a video with some just text on the screen that is supported with an audio file. So it won't necessarily be a full movie, but it'll still give you the visual and the audio elements and not require quite so much resources in terms of download times or file sizes or things like that. All right. So anything else along these lines? This page will be sitting on our Moodle, so just in terms of recaps, but just to get us thinking about where audio might fit into your Moodles. Again, I'm not requiring, generally speaking, any specific type of content on your Moodle pages, but audio might be something you want to consider. If you've got instructions that you're giving and you want to give the students the chance of hearing the instructions and you don't want to do a full video on them, you could do them through just an audio file or an audio recording. And audio, actually, because it is relatively easy to create, audio can also be a great tool for coming back to you. And one of the things that'll come up when we're talking about assessment is that asking the students to create audio that then they send to you can be a great way to get a sense of where students are, particularly if you're working in a subject area like language, foreign languages, world languages, English, maybe doing debate or presentational types of things in a social studies class, anything along those lines. If you're comfortable with audio, then you might be able to incorporate it from the other direction of having your students be the one that generate it. And actually, a couple of the websites we're going to look at tonight online are sort of geared to do exactly that, where you can provide a link to it. Your student goes there, they create the audio, and then the audio gets sent back to you as a submission. So, all right. So with all of this kind of percolating in our brains, the main activity tonight is going to be about Audacity and about producing audio. So what I wanted to do first, there's a lesson I'm going to walk you through and all of that. But aside from that, so there'll be a little bit of redundancy, is I do want to just do a quick introduction myself to Audacity for you, just to point out a couple of things and let you see what's going on with Audacity. And then I'll introduce what the actual activity is and cut you guys loose to work on that activity for a little while. So I'm going to pull up Audacity here on my computer, and give me a second so that I can then share it back to you guys. So I'm going to switch sharing over to Audacity. And let me drag this out a little bigger. All right, so Audacity has become one of the favorite apps when it comes to audio, mainly because it is free. Honestly, is one of the biggest advantages. It's a project that was created in sort of an online environment by a group of people, and they wanted to make it available to everybody. So Audacity has always been free. You can donate to the project if you wish. They have that option. But for the most part, it's become one of the more popular apps to use for audio recording because it is available on every machine and is free and relatively straightforward. The basic interface, and you'll hear this in the lesson tonight as well. There's a lot going on the screen. If you don't have background in audio, the good news is that you don't really need to know what most of the stuff on the screen is about. If all you're really interested in doing is using it to make some simple recordings of just your voice or something along those lines. So what I'm going to try to do tonight is just point out the main things that you do need to understand. So the main area of the program is where the tracks go. In audio production, a track is a container. It's a place where sound gets stored. If you only have one sound happening at a time in a project, you only need one track. You can put multiple things into one track as long as they happen after each other. If you need to have audio happening at the same time in layers, then you're going to need to use multiple tracks. But for tonight's project, and honestly, if all you're doing is just recording voiceovers or that type of material, you really only need one track. So one of the first things always to do is on the tracks menu is to add a new track. And generally I go with stereo. And then that gives you a container on the screen where audio can go. So you will be looking at adding tracks. The transport controls up here in the corner, they're pretty standard buttons and icons for playing, for stopping, for recording, for rewinding. So you can use those buttons. You'll be using those buttons to start and stop recordings and to listen back to recordings once you've made them. So that's a set of buttons that you're going to be looking at. All of these options here down the middle, you will generally be able to leave alone unless you've added additional hardware to your computer. So it's going to go to the default. So it's going to be looking at your built-in microphone, which is what I'm using on the laptop here. It's doing stereo recording. It's going to be using your built-in speakers. So all of those sorts of things you can leave alone. There's a set of tools, though, parked right up here in the middle. One looks like an asterisk, one looks like a pencil, one looks like a cursor. We are going to look at using a couple of these tonight. The main one, though, is just the selection tool. So if you're looking for tools, the tools are all located in this area. And then we're also going to be looking at a couple of the additional features, the editing tools that are found over towards this side where the cut, copy, and paste are. We're going to look at a couple of those. The main thing I want to point out about Audacity that sets it apart from most full audio recording software, so the recording software that I use in my studio, for example, is the difference between destructive and non-destructive editing. And this is part of the reason why Audacity is free, is because it works in a destructive editing environment, which basically means that anything that it has to do to the sound, it actually goes in at that moment and rewrites the audio waveform to include that thing. So if you want to add an effect, it will actually make the effect part of the actual audio waveform. The difficulty with that is if you come back to the project a couple of days later and want to remove that reverb, you really can't, because it's been now baked into the actual waveform. The way most audio programs work is that they add effects non-destructively, meaning that when you hit play, it is actually recalculating the waveform right at that moment to add in the effects that you want to add. So it's not actually changing the original waveform. It's just adding layers onto it as it plays. And that way, if you want to change the effect or get rid of the effect or anything like that, the original waveform is left alone, and you can just reprogram the effect. So the only reason I'm pointing that out is that if you're working in Audacity and you're doing things like edits and cuts and adding effects, you generally want to immediately listen to the results of whatever you just did. Because if you don't like it, you're going to want to undo it right away. Here's your undo button over here. So that it can recover the original waveform or recover the project from right before you added that thing. So if you, like I said, if you add something, save the project, quit Audacity, come back a week later and are working on it and decide you don't like that edit, you can't really go back at that point. So that's just something to be aware of. It's probably the biggest limitation to Audacity. But it's also, like I said, part of the reason they can make it free is because they're not trying to alter waveforms in real time. They are just redrawing the waveform right then and then making that the sound going on. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm trying not to get too technical with what's happening in the background. Bottom line is, if you're working in Audacity, always listen to the results of your edits and your ads right away, so that if you don't like them, you can undo immediately and then do something a little different moving forward. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, so in terms of Audacity, what you're going to be being asked to do tonight is to start by just making a basic recording. And I'm not really going to ask you to do much to it. It's going to be a sort of the control experiment. So you're going to make a recording. You're going to export it. Once you've done a recording, you go to File, and you can export it as an MP3, or I'm going to be having you do WAV files. That's how you get the finished product out of Audacity so that you can then upload it somewhere else. So you'll begin making one recording very quickly, just to have this is what things sound like if I don't do anything to it. And then you're going to be asked to go in and make a second recording. But on that second recording, I'm going to have you do something different at each step along the way. Initially, it's just going to be about some of the setup of where you're recording and how far you are from your computer and things like that. And then you are going to be being asked to go in and use a couple of the effects that are in Audacity in a way that will hopefully improve the quality of the audio. That's sort of the bottom line of tonight, is to show you some basic tools that you can use to make, regardless of what software you're using, or you don't have expensive microphones or whatever, you can still get really good quality sounding recordings if you just pay attention to a couple of these little tips and tricks. So the lesson is going to walk you through, explain one tip or one trick, and then it's going to ask you to apply that trick to your second recording, and then do another one and another one. So in the end, you'll have two recordings. One of them is sort of raw without any corrections, and the second one will have had several corrections applied to it, hopefully in the end resulting in a better quality recording. All right, so, but I just wanted to give a chance to show you Audacity first before sending you on your way to work on it. But again, you're mainly going to be dealing with the File menu, the Tracks menu, and the Effect menu, and the transport controls over here, and a couple of the editing tools that are going to be at the top here. All right, so let me go back now to our Moodle. So again, you're going to be doing a lot more with this in just a minute, but even from just that sort of basic explanation of Audacity, is there anyone that has any questions at this point? All right. So in the Moodle, this audio tricks and tips is our activity for tonight. It is a Moodle lesson. A Moodle lesson allows you as the teacher to take a bunch of different pieces of content and organize it into a series of pages that the students then navigate their way through based on the way that you set up. So, in other words, they can't just randomly jump from one to another. You actually set up, okay, you get done with this page. What do you want to do next? And then you give them some options of where they want to go. So it's kind of like a website in a way. It's kind of like a wiki in a way. But it's a little bit more geared towards taking maybe a piece of content that's got a bunch of different steps to it. And rather than listing all of those steps out in one continuous way, allowing you to break it up and then maybe giving your students some options about how they want to access the material. One of the things you're going to see is that for many of these on this activity, I give you a set of instructions as written text on the page, but then give you the option of also going and watching an instructional video that covers the same material. So you're giving the student the choice between, do they want to read it and just do it that way, or do they want to watch it being done in a video and listen to it that way? So you'll have some options of how you want to approach the material. So I'll just get into it a little bit here, but then the main thing is going to be for you guys to walk through it. So when you open it up, you won't get this page because I've already been in it, so it's saying. So there's kind of the opening to it of just what this activity is going to be about. And it says, when you are ready to begin, click Let's Get Started below. And so you click on that and it takes you to the next page. And this page kind of goes over some of the things that I was just talking about in terms of just a basic introduction to Audacity. But there is also then at the bottom, you have the choice of watching a video that includes the same instructions that we were just reading on the previous page. And you can go back to the text instructions if you'd like to. So you can go back and forth between them. And then when you're ready, you would go on to let's make our first recording. And that takes you to the next page where there are the actual steps that you're going to do to make your first recording. And so you're basically just going to pace yourself through these pages. On many of the pages, you have the option to go back a step if you feel like you missed something. But for the most part, you're going to be working your way through from the first trick to the second to the third to the fourth through to the end. And just following the steps and reading the material as you go. I'm asking you for your content for your recordings to pick one of these 4 sentences here. These are pangrams. If anyone knows, does anybody know what a pangram is? They're also called holoalphabetic sentences. Any guesses? You might know from the first one here. Has all the, yeah, Brian got it. Has all the letters. Why I became a math teacher. Yeah, so all of these, the one that a lot of people know is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. A lot of people do it wrong. They say jumped over the lazy dog, past tense. But if you do that, there's actually no S in the sentence. So it has to be jumps over the lazy dog. The second one, pack my box with 5 dozen liquor jugs. That was one that was actually used by NASA during the space shuttle flights as a way of testing their intercom system. And that's another one that has all the letters of the alphabet. Watch Jeopardy! Alex Trebek's fun TV quiz game, interestingly enough, is actually also a pangram, as is amazingly few discotheques provide jukeboxes. So all 4 of those contain all of the letters of the alphabet. So for your content tonight, for your recordings, you're going to pick one of those sentences. And when you make a recording, you're just going to read the sentence 3 times in a row with a couple of seconds between each one, just to avoid you having to come up with your own content. I figured this way we'd have something that's got a wide range of sounds in it and so on. So, so yeah, let me just to review, let me go back to the beginning of the activity. So the next bit of class is that you're going to go to this activity and at your own pace. So you get to decide if you want to watch the videos or not watch the videos, or so on. Just work your way through the activity. You will need Audacity. So if that's on the computer you're using now, you can leave Moodle open in the background and open up Audacity separately. If you've got a second machine you want to be doing Audacity on so that you can have the instructions and Audacity open at the same time, that's an option too. But basically, you're just going to work your way through. When you're done, you will have saved 2 audio recordings, and you can save those on your desktop or if you've got a place on your computer where you save things. When you have those 2 audio recordings finished, then there's a forum here under week 7 in our Moodle, and you'll simply come to that forum, create a new topic, and upload your 2 audio recordings into your forum post. You don't have to write anything about them. You're just going to upload them as a way to share your finished products from this. So that'll be the end of the activity. Once you have the 2 audios created, is to upload them to this forum, and then we'll go from there. All right, so questions? All right, so timing wise, because I'm having you walk through a multiple step process, I don't have a really clear sense of how long it's going to take people. I don't want you to feel rushed. I want you to feel like you can go through each step of the lesson, watch the videos if you need to, read the material as much as you need to, get the production done. One of the steps, you may actually find yourself grabbing your computer and climbing into a coat closet or something like that. So what I will do, I'm gonna leave the room open, and for the most part, we'll be here. So if you run into an issue, you have a question, feel free to come back and throw something into the chat on WebEx. But let's aim for an hour-ish, like 6:45-ish or so. But what I will do is I will monitor the forum, and if we get to a point where it looks like everybody has posted their videos or posted their audios, if there's still a chunk of time left, then I may sort of call people back a little ahead of that. But like I said, I want to give you time to work through the steps, because it's twofold. It's learning about Audacity and audio recording, but it's also learning how the Moodle lesson format works. So we'll take an hour, and hopefully that'll be time for you to work through the activity, get your audio recorded, post them in the forum, and also in that time, find some time hopefully to take a bit of a break as well. So actually, I have 5:50, so let's say 6:50. Unless everybody looks like they're done, around 6:50, we'll gather back together in the room and kind of debrief on this activity, and then we'll talk about Web 2.0 and Zoom. All right, so questions about what you are about to do? All right, so you will need Audacity, you will need the Moodle with the Moodle lesson, and just take your time and start working your way through from page to page in the lesson, and hopefully come out the other end with a couple of recordings of some pangrams. All right, so I will see everybody in an hour, but like I said, if you need to check in before that, please feel free to do so and let me know if you've got questions or run into problems. All right, I will see you guys together in an hour.